Here at Roger and Chris, we carry a ton of different types of leathers. Actually, probably more than any other furniture company on the planet. And that's great, but it does mean there's a lot to learn about what we offer. One of the most popular categories of leathers that we carry is something called full aniline. And it comes by a few different names. Full aniline, but it'll also often be referred to as a waxed leather or an oiled leather or pull-up leather. It's all kind of the same thing. These are the leathers that you see on a lot of our pieces that have a lot of vibrance to them. They have some sheen to them. They have a lot of variation in the coloring. Now that is absolutely what that leather is supposed to be. It is a leather that is made in a 300-plus-year-old Italian tannery using 300-plus-year-old manufacturing techniques and color management techniques. So it is very, very old school, and that's why you would want it. This type of leather is something you have to be kind of prepared for, because I don't really think that a ton of people have had direct experience with this leather in their homes. This is not the kind of stuff you're seeing at a furniture store where the guys are wearing name tags. It's not really all that widely used. It's specialty stuff. It really does give a high-end, luxurious look and feel, but it has its own unique quirks, and I'm going to tell you about the biggest one right now. The colors on aniline leather are not consistent. They are never 100% dead on. If you want a 100% match on color for your sofa based on a swatch that you've seen from us or elsewhere, you're not going to get it with aniline leather. No matter what, it's not possible. I'll tell you why. The first is how the leather is colored. The leather in this type of leather is colored using a translucent dye. So when you get an aniline leather, whether it's a bright green or a bright blue or red or yellow or brown, it is colored using dye that you can see through. What does that mean? Well, leather is a natural product. That means cows are a natural product. Cowhides come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. They also come in all kinds of colors. So even though it's gone through a tanning process that preps the leather hide for finishing, those leather hides, every single one of them is going to vary a little bit in the overall color of it. So when you apply translucent dye to it, in much the same way that you apply stain to wood, the underlying color of the wood is going to inform the finished color of the stained wood. Same thing happens with this leather. You put green dye on it, but the color of the leather underneath will impact the finished product a little bit. That's all great. That's the point of this leather. But again, if you're seeking consistency, you're going to be a little bit disappointed. The second reason that leather of this type is not going to ever be 100% dead on is that you'll see variation not just from one cowhide to the next, but even across a single cowhide. Now, the way that tends to express itself in our experience is the edges of the cowhide are often a little bit darker than the center. But you can have pooling, too, of that dye, where there are highlights and lowlights all through the hide. Again, that's kind of the point of this. That's kind of why people want this kind of leather. But if you aren't comfortable with it, you're not going to be happy. The third reason we cannot deliver consistency on color is because it's going to exhibit pull-up. Pull-up is, on these types of leather, what happens when you stretch it. So when you stretch a piece of leather of this type, you're going to see brighter colors, lighter colors kind of burst to the surface. Well, what happens when we upholster a sofa? We are working with that leather. We are stretching it. We are pulling it tight around corners. When we are tufting it, we are stretching it as well. So you are going to see highlights and lowlights. It's going to be pronounced. It will actually become more pronounced than it is on the swatch that you're holding in your hand. Play with that swatch. Stretch it. Push your thumb through it. You'll see some of that variety of color. That's what you're going to get on your sofa as well. So for those three reasons, translucent dye, every cowhide being different, even across the hide itself, and pull-up, there is never going to be 100% dead-on color match on an aniline leather. Now, if you want that look, but are uncomfortable with that level of variety of variation, we have a few options for you. First, there are some brands that are going to show less variation than others, even in the world of these pull-up leathers. So if you are, for example, looking at Mont Blanc, it's a beautiful leather, but it does show a tremendous amount of variation. You might want to look at a couple of other lines that we carry, like Bellissimo or, I don't know, there's a couple others. Cortina. Contact us. We'll help steer you in the right direction. Now, you are going to be giving up some of the characteristics of that leather. If you like that, that varied coloring, that really intense color, if you move to other lines, you might not have the same colors. You may not have the same level of variety, and that may or may not be what you're looking for, but it will be generally a bit more consistent. If that isn't going to be enough for you, if you are still uncomfortable with the notion of the sofa that shows up at your house not being a dead-on match for your swatch, then you really need to refocus your efforts and look at semi-aniline leathers. Now, semi-aniline leathers are made in a different way. The whole concept of full aniline and semi-aniline doesn't really mean anything in terms of how aniline things are. I think it's kind of a misnomer. What it does mean is that those leathers are generally dyed using pigments. So if a translucent dye is akin to a wood stain, then a pigment is akin to paint. Paint's job is to obscure the color of the surface beneath it. And that's what pigment does as well. So on semi-aniline leathers, there's much more consistency of color because the underlying cowhide is kind of irrelevant in terms of coloring of the leather. They were going to be consistent across the hide. They're going to be consistent from hide to hide. That's great. Now, the downsides of that is it's going to have a different look. You will not have the color depth or the intensity and vibrance. You will not have that sheen. So you're giving up some things by going that direction, but you do get more predictable coloring. So we are here to help with this. We want you to get what you want. We want what shows up at your house to be what you are expecting. So I strongly encourage you to reach out to us if you're concerned about this, talk about it, and we can help try to get you steered in the right direction.